Every B2B podcast sounds the same. Cookie cutter strategies, corporate buzzwords, high level theory that sounds smart but changes nothing. Meanwhile, the real game changers are out there breaking every rule in the playbook and crushing it. They're not following best practices. They're building their own path and winning in the ways that experts said wouldn't work. These are the rebels you need to hear from, the ones with tactics you can actually use tomorrow. This is Burn the Playbook. Burn everything that's holding you back. Welcome in. I'm Marc Crosby. This is Burn the Playbook. My guest today is Brent Adamson, who is one of the world's leading voices in B2B sales. He's the co-author of best-selling books, The Challenger Sale and The Challenger Customer, and a frequent Harvard Business Review contributor known for reshaping how companies sell and buy. He's been called the man with the biggest crystal ball in B2B sales. Brent has trained and spoken to thousands of commercial leaders worldwide. His latest book, The Framemaking Sale, offers a roadmap for staying relevant and driving performance in a world overwhelmed by buyers and AI. Welcome, Brent.
Thanks, Mark. It's good to be with you.
Where did that come from, the biggest crystal ball in B2B sales? Is that something that a lot of people have said, or is that one person? I want to unpack that one if we can.
As you're saying that, I hear it out loud every once in a while when people do what you just did to introduce me. And it just occurred to me this time, for the first time ever, if you make it plural, it sounds completely different. But but in any case, somebody said it on LinkedIn, and I thought it was kind of catchy, so I took it. Yeah. But now when people use it in the introduction, they make it sound like lots of people are saying that. So I'm starting to feel kind of dirty and guilty about it. So maybe I should change it. Okay. I don't know.
No, I like it. Yeah. When I first read it, I thought that was interesting. And I first read it, I didn't see crystal ball. I thought it was the biggest balls in B2B sales. But, you know.
Like I said, you make it plural. It sounds totally different. It's like the biggest crystal balls. And let's move on.
Moving on. So Framemaking Sale.
Can we fix this in post? We need to fix this in post.
I think we'll leave it in.
Probably. I'm guessing we'll leave it in. Yeah.
Why does B2B need another sales book today, and how does the Framemaking Sale, I guess, differ from Challenger Sale?
So I think I'll tell you what the sales profession probably doesn't need is another sales methodology, which is I tell people I'm not looking to die on any mountain, but I'm certainly willing to do battle on a mountain. And the mountain I'm willing to do battle on here is that the Framemaking Sale, as we've just published it, is not really meant at all to be the next sales methodology. So it's not like stop doing all these other things, whether it's Challenger or Spin or any of the long list, and start doing this instead. It's rather, as you continue to pursue greatness or just goodness at whatever you're doing already, whether it's a homegrown methodology process or something off the shelf, the question I'm really more interested in is the mindset. And this goes to the other part of your question, is like, why do we need another book in sales? I think there's just such a really interesting opportunity to if not rethink, to reestablish what are we even trying to do in the first place in sales? And in some ways, people who read the Framemaking Sale say it's completely fresh and completely new. And in other ways, people read it and say this goes back to the dawn of not just sales, but sort of human interaction. And I think both of those things are true at the same time. Mm-hmm. But in a world in sales where we're really trained and coach to show up and make sure our customers know something, and specifically know something about us, know about our products, our features, our ROI, certainly to know about our value. There's this really interesting opportunity to say, what if there was something else completely different that we could go after in that sales interaction, which is not knowing but feeling, and specifically not changing the way customers feel about us, but changing the way customers feel about themselves. And so that double jump, Mark, and we can unpack this or not, it's up to you where you want to go with this, but that double jump from know to feel and from supplier-centric to supplier-agnostic, that's what I often call a double jump, lands you in a place where just nobody's talking about these kinds of things right now, and that felt like it was worthy of a book.
I agree. It makes a lot of sense. I would say that the content that you put out is something that's probably not found in other books. At least that's kind of what I see. So it is unique in its sort of way. But I think probably some people put it in that category of a sales book. I don't put it in there. And I think even as you articulate in your book, it's not necessarily the frame-making mindset is not supposed to be a sales mindset. It could lay on top of a med pick or a spin. And I think that's what you clearly state in your book. And I think it makes a lot of sense. I think what most people probably would like to do, and maybe they did this with Challenger as well, is take that book and implement it into their sales process. So I guess it doesn't seem like it's meant for that, but it's probably more related to, I guess, what's broken in sales training today. So how do you see this, I guess, being implemented into sales training?
So a couple thoughts. One is give us a call, but we've developed a series of workshops that go with this. But what's interesting is and it's even more than in the book. As we developed the workshops, we began to really think hard about the answer to your question, which is where does this plug in specifically to sales process, particularly in a traditional linear process. And again, in the book, yes, but beyond the book is where we really try to make connections. So, okay, this chapter is really about just rethinking discovery and how we engage in customers in the discovery conversation. This conversation is really about, or this chapter is really about objection handling. And that would be, for what it's worth, in Keeping Track of Home, chapter 6. I don't think we say objection handling much or at all in chapter 6, but when we started building the workshop that goes with it, we realized, oh, this is absolutely 100% objection handling. Chapter 3 is all about process. You had asked me a question offline, and it may come up here. Is this meant to be the process, frame making? And it's not really meant to be the sales process. In fact, we actually suggest that the better way to think about a sales process is an idea that's been around for a while, which is using a customer verified pipeline and sort of moving customers. So your process isn't a series of sales actions. It's a series of customer demonstrated actions that you can document and that they feel good about. The reason why that matters in the frame-making sale is because oftentimes customers themselves won't know what that process looks like, thus opening up an opportunity for you to coach them or guide them to that process. So it is, we think like, here's our sales. Traditionally, we think, okay, do we have a sales process at all? Okay, let's map that out. And then, then we got really enlightened about 10 years ago, started talking or asking about, does our sales process align to the customer's buying process? And then we got sort of one step further and said, what if the customers don't know what their buying process is? And where we landed ultimately now in frame making is this place of, what if you know the customer's buying process better than they know it themselves? And that becomes an opportunity for you to coach or guide them through it such that they feel more confident, not in you, but in themselves to go on that journey in the first place. And so so that's why frame making is a mindset sort of sits on top of all these things. And we talk, as you know, very tactically in the book. So this isn't just a big highfalutin sort of idea book. Every chapter we get down to real deep brass tactical ideas of how you'd execute on these things. Mm-hmm. But I think a lot of those execution tactics are, in many ways, things that some sellers may be doing already, just never really with this purpose in mind. And I think that's what's kind of cool about this.
Yeah, I think so. And you hear a lot of things as far as just sales training and how it's broken. In a lot of cases, salespeople don't get training at all, or it's very limited. And your, I guess, mindset, what should sales training look like? Is it something like a one and done process? If it's, Brent's world and you're leading a sales team, how would you train your sales reps?
In small increments, based on behavior and taking action, and repeatedly reinforced by coaching and so all the things we've been talking about. It's funny, for years, but I think traditional classroom training in a lot of ways it's event based, it's one size fits all, it's once and done, it's not reinforced, and it's not tied to a greater sort of higher level purpose of why are we even doing this in the first place. Mm-hmm. And so, as we all know, Ebbinghaus forgetting curve and all that kind of stuff, it just gets kind of lost. And I know this from my background as a teacher too. You teach your students something, and 3 months later they've completely forgotten it. That sounds like me parenting right now. It's like, I thought we talked about this. I mean, how many times, like, either as an author, as a parent, or as a teacher, I've said, I thought we talked about this. But it's like, oh, so at the end of the day, I think what we're talking about isn't some sort of flaw in teaching or even a flaw in humanity. It's just our reality. So I think if we're thinking about helping really long-term change behaviors, one is we've got to do it repeatedly and in small increments and based on action and at the time of need. All those things are true. And I think, as you know, Graham Hawkins and I were building a project that really designed to do a lot of that in some really cool ways. But I think equally important, and where the book plugs in, is this question of like the why. I think people are far more motivated when they understand why they're doing something and not just that they're supposed to do something. And that's where I think these two things become really important. So there's design principles around what good training looks like, but then there's this higher order question of like, why are you even trying to do this? And what's your goal? What's your objective beyond simply sort of training for the sake of training?
Gotcha. I think that's probably the biggest challenge that most sales leaders out there probably run into, is that they think there's a magic wand. They think that there's a book they can buy. They think there's a workshop that they can do, and then all their problems are solved, and they can move on, and then sales are going to be great. But it's obviously not the case. It needs to be done in smaller chunks. You talked about Sensemaking in the past. Now we have Framemaking. Can you define both of those and
sure,
what the difference is?
So real quickly, sense making is a form of frame making, is the way we think about it. So let's start with frame making. Maybe that's a better way to place start. So the premise of the Framemaking Sale, and really a lot of the research that I've been involved with for a while, is that the single biggest driver of what we call a high quality, low regret deal, and we'll come back to that concept if you'd like, but sort of basically the single shortest, best, most predictable path towards growth is the degree to which customers feel confident in the decision that they're making on behalf of their company. So if customers don't feel confident, they're going to choose not to choose. They're going to buy into status quo. The reason why that matters is because customers' confidence arguably is under greater threat today than it has ever been. They're overwhelmed with decision complexity, information overload, outcome uncertainty, objective misalignment. These are all things we unpack in the book. Framemaking is simply the process, the activity, if you will, of helping customers feel more confident, not in you, but in themselves, to navigate those challenges. So it's to take something big and hard and overwhelming, like let's say decision complexity. I've got to go talk to all these different people in my company. I don't know who's involved. I don't know what order to get them involved in. I don't know what their priorities are. There's steps that I didn't even heard. Like, wait, I've got to talk to like the legal team on this. I didn't know that there was some new freaking requirement in GDPR Europe or whatever. So oftentimes customers, we find, they just get so overwhelmed just thinking about navigating their own internal complexity. And so frame making is this idea of how do I take that thing that's big and hard and overwhelming, in this case, a decision process, and put a frame around it. Give it some guardrails and make it say, yes, it seems like there's a lot of steps, but it's really these 5 steps that matter most in this order. And by the way, number 2 is one you may not have thought about before. So I can bound it. That's the frame. I can prompt you to think about things maybe you haven't thought of. But inside that frame, I'm still leaving you degrees of freedom to make your own decision, to follow your own path, so I've made it easier for you without just showing up telling you what to do. And the reason why that matters is because, again, we're solving not for your confidence in me as an expert. Here's what you need to do. Rather, we're solving for your confidence in you, because that's the bigger driver of a high-quality, low-regret deal. And so I've got to allow you to come to your own conclusions about what's right for you, what questions to ask, what steps to take. But I can make those decisions for you much easier by helping you feel like they're manageable. And that's the idea of a frame. Sense making is this idea of frame making applied specifically to information, which is we live in a world awash with content. We all went down this road of thought leadership. We all want to be a thought leader. We've all got commercial insight or some sort of insight. We all have thought leadership. We're all producing tons and tons of quality insight. I call this the smartness arms race. And we do that, by the way, in hopes of differentiating ourselves, which is ironic because now we're all just really smart and customers are just really confused. And so what we find customers need today isn't yet more content. Hey, Mark, I wasn't really sure what to do, but now that you've given me this white paper, I'm completely convinced. It's more like, oh my God, here's another white paper, here's another website, here's another video series. Like, kill me now. I'm already confused. Now you just confuse me at a higher level. And so what you really, again, some of these big, hard, overwhelming, and unmanageable, what if I were to, as a seller, put a frame around it, say, in working with other customers like you, we find that, yes, there's a lot of information out there, but for someone in your situation, it generally boils down to these 3 or 4 questions. And what we've learned is that these 5 questions, or these, whatever the number is, the small number of questions is ones that you really want to get after first. And by the way, what we've been told from others like you is that these 3 pieces of content in this one website are the best ways to get after that. So what I've done here is rather than showing up and saying, here's another piece of content, I've tried to help you make sense, thus sense making, out of all of that content. I've given you some guardrails to think about it. So sense making in that sense is a form or an example of frame making.
Gotcha. That does make sense. You talked about the differentiation. I mean, I get it. I hope everybody else does. But you talk about differentiation. I think that word's thrown around a lot, just as far as sales. And we need to differentiate, or we need to be different. I don't know. And maybe that's taken on different definitions over the years. And maybe that contributes to the noise, just as far as sellers in the marketplace trying to be different, and it just creates more confusion. So, what should differentiation look like today?
So it was either going to be the first chapter or the last chapter in the book. We ultimately decided to make it the last one just because it's a pretty big idea. But, even if I think, Mark, I'm not super old, but I'm old enough. No one cares, but I'm 57. So I've been doing this for a number of decades. And when I think about sort of the beginning of my career, at least in sales research, which was late 90s, early 2000s, the big shift at the time then, many will remember who were there, was a shift from product selling to solution selling, right? So the whole idea is we're going to compete. So traditionally, If Todd Capone were here as a historian of sales, he'd tell me that everyone was writing about that in 1911 in some weird manuscript that no one's ever heard of. And I love Todd for that. But from my lived memory, in 99, like 98, 99, we're all trying to compete on my product is better than your product. It's got better features, better benefits. What happened, particularly in those years, was the dawn of the internet and all, the global economy and all that kind of stuff. Of course, had been global before, but was fast followers, fast replication. It was relatively easy to replicate individual products with the speed that was heretofore unknown. And so it was very easy for individual products to get commoditized. Companies were saying, all right, well, if our individual products are being commoditized, the opportunity for differentiation there is narrowing. The window is narrowing. What we're going to do is we're going to find a new opportunity for differentiation by selling not just individual products, but solutions. So this is the dawn of solution selling. So we're going to take these three products, snap them together, and say 1 + 1 + 1 = 4. The value is in the fact that they all come together. We're going to sell you on outcomes, things like that. And so, and a lot of the research I was involved with early 2000s was all about how to execute a solution selling strategy, how to put these bigger, more complex solutions together, how to go to market and articulate the value, the incremental value of the solution, that the value of the sum was greater than the value of the sum of the value of the whole was greater than the value of the sum of the individual parts. There it is. Mm-hmm. What happened then? I'm sorry, I'm giving you a long history lesson, which you lived through too. But it's actually kind of instructive. What happened then is companies went on, and still do to this day, go on M&A benders, right? So we're going to go out and think about UPS and FedEx. One started with planes, one started with trucks. Now they both have planes and trucks. And by the way, they both bought a chain of stores. One bought Kinko's, one bought mailboxes, et cetera. You remember them? So they have, so basically by building out their portfolios, they've started here and here, and they converged to the same place. And so what happened was, in an effort to differentiate themselves by selling solutions, not products, they wound up commoditized on solutions, not just on products. Enter about 2011 or so, people are now looking for yet a new way to differentiate, and they realize maybe the way to differentiate is not based on what we sell, but how we sell. We're going to go out and say really smart things, enter the period of thought leadership that's right at that moment when Challenger hit, and it was like lightning in a bottle. People grabbed onto that and said, this is our ticket to differentiation. You fast forward another 10 years to 2020, and now everyone in the smartness arms race is kind of ended in a tie. Everyone's saying really smart stuff, and now your customers are just overwhelmed on too much information, decision complexity, all these other aspects that overwhelm them. And so the opportunity for differentiation today it's still not what you sell, but how you sell. But in terms of how you sell, it isn't just being smart, it's being helpful. And it's actually showing up and helping customers not just think you're great, but help them think they're right. Help them think that they're capable of making these decisions. And that's, no one's talking. This is literally why I dropped everything. I literally quit my job because I'm an idiot, in mid-50s, and put it all, I joke I'm all in. I just don't know if I'm all in on red or black, but I'm all in on this book because I believe deeply that we're all walking past the single biggest opportunity to differentiate ourselves and win unfair share rents in the market that is higher, more than our fair share. And that is by showing up and solving not for customer supplier perception, but customer self-perception. That, to me, is the big opportunity to stand out today.
Yeah, I think the term adding value is probably way overused, and we probably need to replace that with just be helpful. And in the simplest terms, just stop overcomplicating it as far as what value is, because that means different things to different people. But just try to help them out. Just try to bring them some information that they haven't heard before. Help them make a better decision, and all those things you talk about in your work as well. You had mentioned the 4 buyer challenges: complexity, overload, misalignment, uncertainty. Is there one that stands out as the biggest buyer challenge out of those 4?
We had this big, long debates about this in writing the book. In some ways, the answer is not necessarily. It depends a little bit of what's a mid-size account versus a key account. But one thing that everyone seems to be struggling with, and it's kind of the Uber sort of challenge, is just decision complexity, because all of it gets rolled into like, oh my God, so I've gone out for years and asked people to think about a purchase in their own organization. Senior executives, think about something you've bought with your colleagues over the last 2 years or so, whether it's, IT system and consulting engagement, capital equipment. Think about all the people involved, all the steps that took, all the questions that came up. If I were to ask you for one word, one adjective to describe that entire experience, what would that word be? And I've yet to hear a positive word. And quite literally, I've asked tens of thousands of people that question, Mark, on big stages in small rooms. I have yet to hear a positive word. I have yet to hear someone say, oh, it was amazing. I loved it. It was collegial. It was cooperative. It's more like it was awful, frustrating, hard, long, painful. The F-bomb shows up every once in a while. The one that's most memorable we talk about in the book is Chicago meeting with a bunch of CMOs. A CMO just bought a CRM system. It took her 2 years with her colleagues. And you could tell she still had PTSD from it. Not to make light of PTSD, but you could still see the exhaustion and fear and frustration in her eyes. And her word was, I never want to do that again. All one word, all jammed together. And you could tell like she legit never wanted to do that again. And yet she's going to have to do it again. Maybe not for a CRM system, but for something else. Mm-hmm. And this is where we are with customers today is like, that's sort of the overarching challenge. It manifests in decision complexity and information overload and outcome uncertainty and objective misalignment. But this higher level challenge is simply exhaustion, resignation, frustration, confusion. And at some point you just think, I just don't want to do that again. And as I was talking to the guys at Salesforce the other day when I was at a Dreamforce, I said, this is it's all of us. It's not just you, but it's all of us. Like, but imagine your sellers are showing up virtually or in person in the offices of potential customers today, trying to sell a CRM system, and your sellers are now paying the price for your customers' past bad decisions. That's what you're up against. You're not up against the competition. You're up against customers' exhaustion and frustration. And if you can't solve for that first, it doesn't matter how much they love your product if they can't figure out how to get that decision done inside their company. So it's like, that's what happens. Like, and the way that'll manifest, it'll show up, and God knows I've heard this recently and painfully recently, like this week recently, but when that stakeholder looks at you and says, Mark, I love you, man. I love your product. I think it would have so much impact on our company. It would deliver so much value. And I'll tell you, if it were just up to me, I'd buy it today. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then the deal crashes and doesn't, because it isn't just up to them. And that's because it's like, if it were just up to me, I'd buy it today. Yes, 100%. But it's not just up to me, and all that, that's not worth it. That's just, I love you, man, but that's not worth it.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned, and maybe part of that boils down to just having trust in you, trust in your solutions, trust in your organization. And maybe we should revise sales just around that one theme of trust. So how do you establish trust with your buyers? And I guess, how do you even measure trust also? Because that's one of the things I was thinking about as you were talking about the linear process of sales and the funnel. And something that I keep thinking about is it's never linear. And you've talked about this as well. And it kind of boils down to establishing that trust. So how do we measure trust, and how do we know when we've gotten there as that destination, so to speak?
So this is where I'd hopefully very diplomatically and with a lot of love and support for you personally, Mark, I'd love to reframe you, because I think that what you just asked is actually the problem. And I say that with huge respect, because goodness knows I've been part of this story too. We all are solving for the same thing. And I think we're all solving for the wrong thing. Is what we're all solving for is, how do we get customers to trust us? How do we get them to trust me as an individual? How do we get them to trust our brand, our product? How do we get them to trust our value? And so that's what we do. We show them, like, trust me, I've got 30 years experience. Trust our value. Here's the ROI calculator. Trust our commitment. Here's the 5 other raving fans who love it. But notice, everything we do in sales is specifically designed to solve for customers' perception of us, and specifically their trust in us. And I was talking to Charlie Green about this the other day. He is the author, one of the co-authors of Trusted Advisor. So, I mean, if anyone knows about this stuff, it's him. And I told him, I said, Charlie, I think there's a different way to think about this. And I wanted to see if he was aligned to it. And lo and behold, he was, which is, he's a smart guy. He's a great guy, by the way. You should have him on your show. He's a really neat dude. But what if, rather than solving for trust in us as the primary objective, we solve for customers' trust in themselves as the primary objective? What if we help customers feel more like, I can do this. We know what to do. We know which questions to ask. We know what's right for our company. We know we're aligned. We know how to get aligned with each other. If you become the agent of customers' self-trust, you will win their trust as a byproduct of that action. So in other words, the way I think of customers' trust of you is not so much as the objective, but the byproduct. And that is complete. So it goes back to your first question, why write another sales book? Because nobody's thinking like this. And yet I think it is absolutely the right way to think about it. It's like, in that conversation with Charlie, you said, it's kind of like a good therapy session. Like, the therapist doesn't tell the patient what to do and get the patient to trust the therapist. The goal of the therapist is to get the patient to make their own decisions and come to a place where they can trust themselves to take action. And this is why this book, Framemaking Sale, is really a book about humanity dressed up as a book about sales, because it's the exact same dynamic we're talking about here. It just feels so foreign because we don't talk about sales like this. We talk about sales as like, you've got to make our value clear. We've got to make sure they understand. You've got to be their trusted advisor. It's like, no, you've got to be the agent of helping them feel better about themselves, trust themselves, more confident in themselves. That trust in you will come directly as a byproduct of being the one seller that shows up like that, because no one else is.
I think.
Do you buy that? By the way, I say that with conviction, don't I? But do you buy that? Does that ring true to you, or do you think, like, dude's smoking something? I don't know what it is, but I want to get me some of that.
A little bit of both, I think.
Yeah. Tell me more. Yeah.
I mean, I think for trust, I mean, one of the things that I learned in a sales course that I took a long time ago was just asking questions and asking more questions. And then once that felt uncomfortable for me is asking more questions, because I think if you're trying to establish trust and even to get to the root of why people buy, I think you just have to dig deeper. And to use your, I guess, psychologist analogy, that's kind of what they do, right? They ask you a question, or you tell them a problem, they ask you a question, and they turn it around back to you and they ask you another question, and they just keep asking you questions to immediately you arrive to that conclusion yourself, and you have this aha moment while you're sitting on the couch, so to speak. But I think that also works, tell me if you disagree, as far as just in sales is understanding why they would want to buy the product, what problem are they trying to solve, and then kind of drill down into the why of those buying, I guess, habits or reasons why they would buy. And I think once they come to that conclusion themselves, then it probably, like the frame making sale, they have more confidence in themselves once they kind of realize like this is the right decision based on all the questions you asked me. I guess does that make sense to you?
I think so. I think I'd put I was super interesting, right? I think I'd put a slightly different spin on it, but I think we're largely agreeing with each other. But what if you came to the table with a hypothesis of the types of questions they should be asking themselves? Right. And there's a different way. There's different kinds of questions you could ask, and there's different reasons why you'd ask questions. And I think that's where we get that's where these things run into false positive problems. Right. So if I ask you like, what's keeping you up at night? Hopefully we all agree that's just a horrible question. Right. It's the educate me on your business because I was too lazy to do my own research sort of thing. Right. But if have you talked to your manager about this? It feels a little bit like an accusation, right? But I take that same question. What if I know that I can't sell you unless I know that your boss's boss is bought in? So I might just say, have you talked to your boss's boss about this? Because that's important. That kind of sounds like either like I've just given you an assignment or work. But what if I take that question and re-articulate it as a piece of advice that I learned from someone else who's been in the similar shoes as my customer? We call this the phrase that frames. And what if I were to say, rather than saying, hey, Mark, I've been doing this for 30 years. And one thing I found, if your boss's boss isn't involved, we're kind of toast on this. So have you talked to her about it? That's not very helpful. But if I say it like this, the phrase that frames, I say, Mark, one of the things we learned is it's actually kind of interesting in working with other customers like you and a couple that have struggled and a couple have succeeded. The one thing that seems to come up again and again is this multi-level problem. And what we found from a couple customers who've managed to get this across the finish line and feel really good about it, they actually brought their boss in early and specifically around these two questions. Is that something that you've considered? Because we're learning from them that might actually really matter. So notice I just asked you a question, but I asked you a totally different question, but to the same purpose. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it makes sense. One puts me on the defensive, and the other one just kind of opens me up to kind of thinking about, I don't know, have I asked my boss? It makes sense, at least the way you reframed that question, and it sounds a lot more eloquent. You talk about in the book, and you mentioned it before, as far as a high quality, low regret deal. So what does that mean? And I don't know, how do we know when we've established, I guess it's kind of similar to the question I asked about trust. Like, how do we know when we've gotten to the point of a high quality, low regret deal to where we can go ahead and just sign the contract, or knowing that they're going to get, buy-in and do the deal? And I guess the other thing I think about, and sorry to layer like three questions into one thing.
Sorry, it's all good. I do this too.
And I already lost my train of thought, but tell me more about high quality, low regret.
High quality, low regret deal.
We got there.
So there's two ways to define high quality. There's actually multiple ways, I suppose, to define high quality, low regret deal for the purpose of our research. So in sort of this outcome of customers' decision confidence being the single biggest driver of a high quality, low regret deal by far, there it was a customer's perception, and the way we defined it in the surveys we ran to generate this finding was, it's a deal where that you didn't settle, but you bought sort of you thought you were buying this, and you didn't wind up buying that. You didn't, in other words, if there's anyone listening, so you didn't think you were going to buy something big, and you wound up buying something small, but rather you bought the size or the scope of the deal that you originally planned, if not even a little bit bigger. Maybe you invested in a couple extra services. In other words, you didn't shrink it down. So that's a high quality deal from the customer's perspective. And the low regret is simply you felt good about whatever you decided. You didn't have purchase regret as a result of buying the thing that you did. So you put those things, and you ask those in, there's 3 or 4 different questions you ask for quality dimensions, and 2 or 3 questions you ask for regret dimensions, and that gives you a regret score and a quality score, and you just put all that together mathematically, and it gives you a high quality, low regret score. Mm-hmm. I think from a supplier's perspective, a high quality deal is essentially a deal that is aligned with your strategy, right? It's the deal that you're trying to do. So it's like, Obviously, status quo is probably not where you want to be, unless when you're in a pure renewal-based business. Then, of course, maybe it would be. But if you're looking to expand, is it expand by 3% or is it 10% or 5%? Is it expand across geographies or is it expand across product business units or product lines or whatever it might be, or additional seats, or so there's lots of different ways you can think about high quality. But for our purpose in research, and what we're talking about here is simply a deal where the customer doesn't settle for status quo, doesn't settle for the small deal, but buys the bigger solution, the broader product, and feels good about it at the same time, which ultimately is what we all care about in some fashion or another on the supplier side, because that's what's going to lead to growth. And so it's deals that lead to expansion.
Gotcha. The question I was thinking about before that ties into that is the low regret part of that. And so I guess the example I was thinking of is kind of establishing that it will be a low regret deal for the long term and not just the short term. And I guess the question I'm thinking is like, if I were to tell you, hey, would you like some oceanfront property in Arizona? And you said, yes, absolutely. And then I took a pause.
Yeah.
Don't you want to see it? Or because I don't want you to have any regrets after this, finding out that there is no ocean in Arizona.
Yeah.
And, for enterprise deals, you want to have those, long-term relationships and partnerships. And you
Totally.
don't want anybody to, I guess, have any regrets. So at what point, I guess, do you establish that we've checked all the boxes, we've covered all our bases as far as you're not going to have any regrets, your boss isn't going to have regrets, all those people that are in that multi-threading, ecosystem, everyone's good. I mean, how do you know, like, when you have that low regret and everyone's on board?
So I'm going to put my nitpicky researcher hat on for just a second and just sound really annoying and say we can never really know anything. But I know that sounds annoying, but we can't. So the point is, just to be fair to the research and to you and everything we're trying to say in this book, everything is about probabilities, right? So it's about how do we increase the likelihood of, as opposed to how do we guarantee. And I think that's it's one thing we can easily gloss past, but it's actually important to remember. But here's the answer to your question, one way or another, which is this idea of low regret. Remember, so what we're trying to derive from the research is what are the drivers or the things that are most likely to lead to low regret. And it turns out it's these dimensions of customer confidence. So the question becomes, if we can gauge and measure, and ultimately what Framemaking Sale is about, encourage or increase the customer's confidence across a purchase, then we're more likely to decrease the level of regret. So we can't operate on regret directly, but we can operate on regret indirectly through increasing confidence. And those confidence dimensions, and this is all laid out in the book, but it'd be things like, how confident are we that we've even asked the right questions in the first place? How confident are we that we've done enough research, that we've thoroughly explored alternatives, that we're aligned not just on the supplier, but we're aligned on the problem and the solution. And so there's not only sets of questions you could ask, and we're working on this too. I think it becomes a really interesting sort of like exercise you could do with customers around, like you could literally on a scale of 1 to 7, how confident are you that you've asked the right questions? But more important for a seller, I think you get into this question of what are the right questions? In other words, if you do your homework up front, working with previous customers that either wiped out or bought and are happy, then you can begin to ask them, like, what questions did you ask that proved to be the most important questions you ask? Who were the people that were most important to get involved? At what point so that I can, as I learn all those things, I can begin to identify. We call this the establish phase of framing. So you're establishing your coaching, you're establishing your framing. You can begin to identify what's the fingerprint of a more confident decision. What is the fingerprint of a decision that's less likely to lead to regret? And then you can turn that into advice. In working with other customers like you, what we found is there's really 3 questions that seem to matter most, or there's 2 people that need to be involved here. So again, rather than me showing up saying, hey, Mark, here's what you need to do, I show up and say, here's what we've learned. So I'm positioning myself as a co-learner with you. I'm on this journey with you, trying to feel confident with you. And we're doing that by using social proof from other customers and the lessons they've learned around things that have driven their confidence.
Gotcha. And how does AI, I guess, play into all of this? I think some people are probably just going to go to ChatGPT and they're going to say, hey, I'm in the process of trying to create a high quality, low regret deal for this customer. Give me 10 questions I should ask them. Will it give me good questions to ask, or give me a bunch of
it's a great question. I think one way to find out is to go try it. Honestly, yeah. I don't mean to be flippant about it. I think like a lot of us have sort of mixed emotions about AI. Not about they're going to take over the world, but I'm just in terms of using it. Right? I asked AI the other day. I was trying to get the annual revenue of a privately held company. I asked AI, and it says it's about $10 million. And I said, well, that's kind of small. I thought it was a lot bigger. And it said, oh, you're right. It's $100 million. It's like, wait, what? It's like. If I hadn't asked the second question and just gone with the first one, I could have showed up and been a total jackass in front of that customer, right? It's like,
so it goes back to my point before. Keep asking more questions.
And see, and that's the problem. See, this is exactly right. So when you ask, like, so if you read the Framemaking Sale or Win, right, is you're going to find AI, honestly, because we did this once. We did a word search on the book, the entire manuscript, and I think AI is in there twice. It's either in there once or twice. It is clearly not a book about AI, partly because we started long before AI like completely exploded, but partly because that's not what we're trying to solve for. Because I think customers using AI and building RFPs and filling out column fodder and all that kind of stuff, they wind up in the same situation. They wind up actually more confused, not less confused, because they change the prompt even slightly and they get a completely different answer. It's like, now what do I do? It's like, I wish I could just talk to someone. I don't want to talk to sellers because they're just going to try and sell me. They're a pain in the ass, right? But I wish I could talk to other buyers. I wish I could talk to someone like me who's already made this decision. And what if then that became your opportunity as a seller? It's not to show up as a seller, but to show up as a connector. To say, what I have is not my expertise. What I have is my access to other companies like you and share with you the stories of what they learned, what they wish they'd done, what they have done differently, what worked for them, what didn't work for them. And I think that's the thing, again, we're all kind of walking past right now in terms of our value as a seller, is our value in terms of access to other customers like the one we're selling to, not so much our value as an expert. We're all trying to be a freaking expert, and so particularly when we're young in our career or new in our career, we think, well, how am I supposed to sell successfully if I'm going to do this for the years? I need to wait 10 years before I become an expert. It's like, no, you can go start figuring out right now what other customers have learned and share that and make your value differentiated by being the only one that's actually providing customers what they really want, which is social proof and access to other people like them, and not just another freaking AI prompt that tells them something different yet again.
Yeah, I hate it when I ask a question to ChatGPT and then I challenge it and it's like, oh, you're right. I didn't made that up. Or
right. And then, it's really funny because I do ever ask. It's really funny because I've done this. Like, so why did you? If it's that, then why did you tell me this? Like, well, sometimes we make mistakes. It's AI is not perfect. It's like, am I seriously having this discussion with AI right now? I asked, by the way, this is a true story. And no. So I was as in writing the book. When I wrote the book, I didn't use AI to write. I don't, because I love to write. I hate to write, but I love to write. It's a weird thing, a long story. But anyway, so I don't even use AI to edit. But what I did use AI for was the citations. Like, and one was super easy. It's like I got to a place where I was going to make a reference back to the Challenger sale, and I just needed I needed the Challenger sale citation in Chicago manual style, so I could put it in just put it in footnote. I don't want to go look. I was like, is it an arrow? Is it a is it a period here and a comma, or a period like last name? Well, I was like, so I asked ChatGPT. And actually, I asked Copilot. I don't know if it matters, but I asked Copilot. But it turns out, I don't know if you knew this, but the Challenger sale was written by Neil Rackham. I did not know that. And so it's like, that was, it's like, are you sure? Because I kind of remember, anyway, so God love Neil. No offense to Neil, but he didn't write the Challengers. He wrote the foreword, but not anyway. Yeah.
Gotcha.
I love that man.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I don't know if I trust, we'll get there. I'm sure we'll get there. I don't mean to sound like a Luddite, but I think where we're going to get with it. But here's the thing. If AI can solve for what customers need to know, I think we just discussed our limitations, but let's assume there aren't limitations and it gets better and better and better, which I'm sure it will, because the number of data centers that they're building here in Loudoun County, Virginia, tells me it's going to get significantly better very soon, because it's all it is here is data centers now, right? Mm-hmm. But what that means is AI is going to get better and better at helping customers know things. And this goes back to our point from earlier in the discussion about differentiation. Well, if I'm trying to show up as different from other sellers, but also different from technology, what can I do as a human being that technology cannot do, or at least cannot do very well? And there might be still a small but shrinking window of opportunity to help customers know something that AI can't help them know. But I think that window is going to slam shut pretty quickly across the next couple of years. But the window of opportunity that's going to remain open for the foreseeable future for me as a seller is to help customers not know something, because then I'm competing against AI, but to help customers feel something, because then I'm competing in a blue ocean, because neither sellers nor AI are doing that right now.
Well said. Our point of differentiation on the Burn the Playbook podcast is our segment called Burn It or Build It, which we'll jump into, which is our rapid fire questions. I will throw out a topic and you tell me either to burn it or build it, and maybe a brief reason why. So number one. Oh, first, are you ready?
Hold on.
Okay,
I'm ready.
All right.
Yes.
Number one, customer is always right.
Burn it. The customer's rarely, the customer's rarely right, and they know it. And so you know more about how customers buy, who should be involved, what decisions should follow, what information matters most than they do themselves. Use that to your advantage and become their coach and their guide.
Nice. Number 2, traditional sales training workshops.
Well, as a person trying to sell traditional training workshops right now, I would say build it like crazy and sell the hell out of them. But I would suggest, and I think we'd all agree that is if not step 1, step 2. Maybe there's a keynote in front of it. I'd sell those two. But you have to get the idea out into the world and socialize it and get people familiar with the tools. But without I think where you and I both go would be without long-term reinforcement and without a higher level why this matters in the first place. Then it's insufficient. So rethink it.
Agreed. So we're split on that one, and that's fine.
Yeah.
Traditional acronyms like MEDIC, BANT, SPEN, all those things in sales, burn it or build it.
Yeah. I drove a stake through the heart of BANT pretty aggressively about 15 years ago, and it's still alive. So happy to go on that riff if you want. But MEDIC, on the other end, or MedPick, or take your flavor, I don't think it's a sales methodology, so don't. But I do think it has value. So don't burn it, but understand what it is and make sure that you don't build an entire house on that foundation, because it's not foundational. It is rather it's a great rubric for qualification. It is not a sales methodology. And in any one of those letters of MedPick is a reframe that's waiting to happen. I've built some of that content. So if anyone wants to be reframed on each of the letters of MedPick, give me a call, because that's a rebuild it. That's what that is.
Gotcha. A rebuild it. All right. We need to have a new.
Is that a thing? I made up a thing. Bant, on the other hand, burn that thing. Burn that thing with let's put that in the solo stove and just let it go, man. It'll be gone in 30 seconds. Have you used a solo stove? Those things are amazing, by the way.
I do. I have one. I love it. It's fantastic.
Oh my God.
It's so efficient, and it's great this time of year.
You go through like $500 worth of firewood in one night, though, because it burns it so fast. Anyway, sorry.
It's effective.
Fly-by marketing. I'm ruining your game. Keep going. What's the next one?
No, it's all good. Solo stove. We're going to build that.
Yeah.
Discounts to win deals. So when it's all said and done, we're at the finish line, so to speak, and we're just going to discount our way to close the deal.
I don't know if I can get you 10% discount, but I might be able to get you 5%. I just need to talk to my manager, but only if you act now. I think that's a bad way to go. I burn the heck out of that. However, I think there is, in fact, I just did this week. It's not, I don't know if it's discounting, Mark, but reducing the price while shifting the value commensurately. Do you see what I'm saying? It's like, okay, we need to bring it down by $15,000, but instead of being able to do this and deliver this value, then we're gonna have to rescope it such that the scope is now consistent with the price. I don't know that that's discounting. So as long as there is a consistent relationship between value and price, then I think the price can go up and down as necessary. Obviously, we always want the price to go up, but the value should go up with it too. So, but just discounting for the sake of discounting, that's a slippery slope into really bad places.
Agreed. So we'll burn that one. So it's
we'll burn that one. Yeah.
Okay. Company history and PowerPoints. And the reason why I asked this one, at least, is that typically we lead with the first 5 to 10 slides about our company history. We're 150 years old. Burn it or build it.
Burn the heck out of that one. This is old Challenger riff. I had a long riff on this one. It's like, oh, you were founded in 1853. Oh, I thought you were founded in 1863. Well, now I'll buy from you. That 10 years really makes a difference.
Everything.
Right? Burn that.
Okay. Burn that. That was easy. That was a layup. Thought leadership PDFs. There's a lot of thought leadership on LinkedIn these days. Burn that or build it.
I don't know if you need to burn it, but I wouldn't build much more of it. This is where if customers are already overwhelmed with too much information, just pouring more information into the world doesn't really seem to be helpful. So rather, what I would suggest is rebuild it. Rebuild your content. This is a lot of frame making. A lot of the work we're doing with marketers is rethink your content strategy around being helpful to customers to make decisions rather than just giving one more thing to think about.
Makes sense. Goes back to being helpful.
Yep.
What number this is? 7. NPS as your North Star.
Net Promoter Score. With respect to Fred Reichelt, I would tell you this is what we found in research. So this is burn it. Again, with due respect to Fred, who I've never met, but burn it unless your North Star is retention and pure retention, not expansion, just retention. Net Promoter Score is a great indicator of likelihood of retention. As soon as you throw growth into the equation, whether it's new logo acquisition or expansion of existing, Net Promoter Score is no longer predictive of an actual outcome.
Agreed. So it's slightly burn.
Rescope it. Burn it on the edges. Yeah, burn it so it's smaller. Burn it. Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
Anyway.
Rebuild it.
Yeah.
So you established a new category. Rebuild it.
Completely blowing up your. I'm sorry. I'm not playing by the rules at all.
That's okay. That's why it's called Burn the Playbook. We can just redo it as we go.
We just burned the playbook of the playbook of the, and got it.
Burning our own. Buyer intent data. So this is very popular. There's a variety of different, data points that people look to. Burn that or build it.
I'm about to do a keynote for 6 Cents, so I think we have to keep it. I think so. Build it, but build it differently than you think you should. I think it's interesting. I really do, and I think there's more that we can learn there. Mm-hmm. One of the things we know from our research, though, is that much of the consumption of content and activity online that customers engage in a purchase happens far earlier than you think. So to the degree that you think those intent signals are actually indicating process through a purchase and advancement through a purchase, they probably aren't. But to the degree that you see intent signals as someone at the top of the funnel as maybe potentially ready to go on that journey, I think they have some real value. To be totally honest with you, I think I've got a lot more to learn there. I'll raise my hand and say, before I pass judgment, I'd love to get smarter on it. But but we have to just be careful what we think that intention is telling us.
I agree. It's kind of like the last one on MPS. You just shouldn't put all your, eggs in one basket, so to speak.
Yeah.
Final one here is LinkedIn post to buy buyer confidence. I'm sorry, boost buyer confidence.
It feels like I'm not only living in LinkedIn all day, but sleeping there too. So by the way, if someone wants to do it, maybe you could bring someone on the show and I could watch and we could talk about top of the funnel and just like the very top demand generation. That has become complete mystery to me. Is like if outbound doesn't work, if inbound doesn't work, if content doesn't work, as I've said 3 times on this call today, what does work? I read an email or a LinkedIn post this morning. Apparently, the guy was advocating for sending handwritten letters because it's so differentiated. Go back to your differentiation points. Like, well, artisanal, but maybe effective. But I'm placing a pretty big bet on a high level of activity on LinkedIn right now, and I absolutely see it helping. But it's hard to imagine it's going to help at scale, which is so. I don't know. To me, it's hard for me to say burn it unless I had a clear alternative, and I don't. So for me, it's build it.
I guess you could tie it back into the frame making mindset and just be helpful. So if you're going to put content out there, be helpful and just don't repeat all the same stuff that everybody else is saying.
I've been saying to marketers for years, it's not your content that matters, it's the content of your content. So they worry about channel. So your question was a channel question. Should it be on LinkedIn or somewhere else? And my answer, what it really would be, is it doesn't matter. It's less important where you put it. More important is what you put in it. Like, what is the content of your content matters more.
True. Well said. That's the end of the burn it or build it. You get the final word today. Actionable tip for a sales leader that they can implement today to help drive better sales for 2026.
One thing, whether you're a seller, a sales manager, a marketing team, sales enablement, any of us and all of us probably could and should do is a tip we lay out in the book and something we found as a best practice a number of years ago at CEB, which I think is super cool. It goes sort of under the idea of rethinking customer testimonials. So when you go out and talk to a customer and looking for a customer testimonial, a happy customer, a raving fan, and usually we do that so that they can go talk to potential customers and tell them how much they love us, right? It's like how much value they got from us, all the great things about us. And so, okay, now enough about me. Here's someone else to talk about me, right? A totally different way to think about those happy customers or customers successfully bought is if you were to sit down and have a conversation with them, ask them, so this is someone who's managed to buy your solution, going through the long slog and cross the finish line, and ask them, if you had to do it all over again, buying the buying journey, what would you do differently to make your life easier? How could you have made this process less painful, a little bit more efficient? What would have had to have happened such that you come out the other end saying, I never want to do that again, or I wouldn't mind doing that again. And don't make it about me and our company, just make it about your own company. And then whatever they say, that's advice. That is raw material for frame making. And then use that in the prospective customer and working with other customers like you, one of the things we've learned is, so rethink your customer testimonials and asking questions like, if you had to do it all over again, what would you do differently? Or if you had to do it all over again, what would you do to make it easier? Or if you were about to give advice to someone else about to go on a similar purchase journey, what advice would you give them to make their life easier? Super tactical idea. You can do that at any level of the company. And I think what you're going to learn becomes raw material for incredibly powerful frame making.
Nice. Love that. Well said. And where can people find Brent to set up a frame making workshop for 2026?
The FramematingSale.com is the book website, or if you want to take the off, FramematingSale.com will take you to the same place. I'm on LinkedIn. Those are probably the easiest places to find me. If you happen to be in Northern Virginia, let me know, and we'll go out and get a Chipotle bowl. Oh my God, I don't know about you, Mark, but I eat Chipotle 8 days a week, so it's not good. Yeah, I know it's not good. So this is why I need more workshops to sell, because I got to fund my Chipotle habit. Yeah.
Good stuff. Well, thank you for joining us on the Burn the Playbook podcast here, and appreciate your time.
Cheers, everybody.
All right. Cheers. That's how you burn the playbook. If this conversation fired you up, don't let it end here. Subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Share this episode with someone who's tired of playing by the old rules. And if you're ready to challenge your own sales approach, let's connect. Find me on LinkedIn at Marc Crosby, or head to digitalrebelsconsulting.com to see how we help B2B teams win differently. Until next week, keep burning what's not working and keep building what is.